on satellite, on Freeview, on cable, on radio, on mobile, on the web and around the world. This is First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7.
Making headlines first at 9. Two heads meet. President Maithripala Sirisena meets US President Donald Trump in New York. New Constitution. Prime Minister tables the interim report by the steering committee towards a new constitution. Interpretation of law. MP Gammanpila says a fundamental rights case will be filed against the Attorney General. New trial at bar. Deputy Minister Ajit Pereira questions the efficiency of the country's legal system. Making headlines in the international arena. Multiple earthquakes. 3 other earthquakes on the other side of the world to Mexico. Bring you news from home and across the world. This is First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7. Good evening, I'm Katrina Chang. Now on to your local news tonight. UN President Maithripala Sirisena, who is in New York to attend the 72nd United Nations General Assembly, met with US President Donald Trump yesterday. First Lady Jayantha Sirisena and her US counterpart, Melania Trump, were also present at the occasion. Meanwhile, Trump's criticism of the Iran nuclear deal stirred angry rhetoric at the UN General Debate.
President Maithripala Sirisena and First Lady Jayantha Sirisena had cordial discussions with US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump following a reception for heads of state attending the 72nd United Nations General Assembly. Meanwhile, yesterday at the UN General Debate, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani lashed out at the US administration over its criticism of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which US President Donald Trump described as an embarrassment.
It will be a great pity if this agreement were to be destroyed by rogue newcomers to the world politics. The ignorant, absurd and hateful rhetoric filled with ridiculously baseless allegations that was uttered before this august body was not only unfit to be heard at the United Nations, but indeed contradicted the demands of our nations to bring governments together to combat war and terror.
Addressing the assembly, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe insisted that it was time to act, not talk, on the North Korean missile threat.
For North Korea, dialogue was the best means of deceiving us and buying time. We need to use pressure, not dialogue. We must prevent the goods, funds, people and technology necessary for nuclear and missile development from heading to North Korea. There is not much time left.
Meanwhile, dozens of countries signed a treaty to ban nuclear weapons, which will enter into force 90 days after it is ratified by 50 countries. The signing was boycotted by a number of countries, including the US, UK and France.
The interim report of the steering committee pertaining to the Constitutional Assembly of Sri Lanka was tabled in Parliament by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe today.
The interim report mentioned President's remarks on people of the South being fearful of the word federal, while people in the North were fearful of the word unitary. The report emphasizes that a constitution is not a document that people should fear. Given the circumstances, the steering committee proposes the term unitary state should mean a state which is undivided and indivisible. The committee's report also suggests province be the primary unit of devolution. Accordingly, the existing provisions of the constitutions relating to the possibility of 2 or more provinces forming a single unit should be retained, with the additional requirement that a referendum of each of the provinces concerned should also be required. Report also states that the constitution should not provide for merger. It further suggests that the constitution should recognize the northern and eastern provinces as a single province. Meanwhile, the steering committee is of the view that the governor should act on the advice of the Board of Ministers other than where he or she is specifically authorised by the Constitution. Under the subject, the executive, the committee mentions that there was general consensus that the executive presidency should be abolished. It also says the president should be conferred with powers including those in relation to provincial councils in specified situations. The report further mentions the president should be elected by the parliament for a fixed term of office. Under the subtopic, election of prime minister, the committee had proposed 3 methods, namely the direct election, pre-nomination and Westminster system. Meanwhile, the committee mentions of general consensus that a second chamber should be established in the parliament. It is suggested that the second chamber should consist of 55 members, 45 drawn from the provincial councils and 10 members elected by parliament on the basis of a single transferable vote. The report emphasises that the electoral system should be mixed member proportional system which seeks to ensure proportionality of the end result while also having directly elected constituency seats. The steering committee is also of the view that the first chamber of the parliament should consist of 233 seats, 140 being chosen on the basis of first past the post and 93 as compensatory seats. Under the topic public security, President is to declare state of emergency as per the advice of the Prime Minister. The report also says the declaration of emergency shall be subject to parliamentary approval and be subject to judicial review.
Meanwhile, in Parliament, a multitude of views were expressed on the interim report of the steering committee pertaining to the Constitutional Assembly and the new constitution.
There are sections where the roles of the executive and the president are yet to be defined and clarified. Broad dialogue is required within Parliament and among the public in this regard. After formulating the draft constitution, the steering committee will present the final report to the legislative. We hope to convene the legislative and hold a debate in October during a week without parliamentary sessions.
Sri Lanka Nidahas Paksha වෙන කිසිම පක්ෂයක්
The SLFP put forward several unique proposals. The number of ministerial portfolios should be reduced to 30. Some form of executive presidency should be retained. We don't oppose devolution of power. We have agreed to devolve power as much as possible. In such a backdrop, we have stressed on the need for a president elected by the people of all ethnicities for the sake of unity.
ජනාධිපතිවරයෙකුගේ අවශ්‍යතාවය අපි අවධාරණය කරලා තියෙනවා. මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව යලි ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් පිළිබඳ
If this parliament wants to go for a new constitution, it cannot preserve democracy or protect the people's rights while retaining the executive presidency. Whatever is said about democracy and the electoral system, those have been destroyed. The suggestions of our MPs in the subcommittee were completely rejected. You cannot formulate a draft, let alone a constitution, in such an autocratic manner.
The successful conclusion of the constitution-making process would bring about a firm finality to this issue. Sri Lanka would perpetually be a united, undivided and indivisible country in keeping with the basic and supreme law of the country and on the basis of the free will and consent of all its people.
Meanwhile, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa stresses that the people should unite to oppose the government's destruction of the country's democratic institutions. Now, releasing a statement to media, he also said that the present government turned the lawmaking process upside down to avoid holding elections.
In his statement, the former president charged the United National Party, UNP allies of the SLFP, TNA and JVP for ceremonially introducing changes to the Provincial Council's elections law in order to indefinitely postpone PC elections. The former president says, quote, "Though the dissolution of the provincial councils will take place as scheduled, the latest changes to the Provincial Council's elections law will enable the government to indefinitely delay elections to the PCs on the excuse that constituencies need to be demarcated." This was the same excuse this government used to postpone the elections to the local government bodies, which have now been delayed by over 2.5 years. Unquote.
Representatives from several political parties today expressed their views on the Provincial Council Elections Amendment Bill, which was passed in Parliament last evening.
ඇත්තම ආණ්ඩුව 20 වන සංශෝධනය ගෙනාවේ මැතිවරණ එක දවසක තියන්න නෙවෙයි.
The government brought the 20th Amendment to postpone elections. Supreme Court told the government to go for a referendum as they were planning to postpone elections. The draft bill was brought to assure 30% representation of women in elections. While that debate was underway, they brought guidelines to introduce the electorate system. If an amendment comes during a parliamentary debate, its suitability should be informed to the Speaker by the Attorney General. The AG did not act according to the Constitution. Instead, he said that those amendments are consistent with the Constitution. Therefore, we will table a proposal in Parliament to remove him.
නීතිපතිවරයා ඉවත් කිරීමේ යෝජනාවක් අනදක් ගැසට් කරයින් පස්සේ ඒ මොහොතේම පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න බෑ.
Once you gazette a bill, it cannot be tabled before Parliament on the same day. There should be at least a 2-week period from the day it is gazetted for it to be taken up for debate, since the people need to be aware of its content. Following which, citizens can file a petition before the Supreme Court should there be an issue. But this is not followed.
පෙත්සමක් ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමට. දැන් ඒ විධිවිධානය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් නිෂේධ කරනවා.
අපි පක්ෂයක් වශයෙන් පළාත් පාලන ඡන්දය
We as a party decided to support this under the conditions that the local government elections be held in January without postponement and provincial council elections be held on the same day within 1 year from today. We are aware that the purpose of this amendment is not to increase the women representation. The Gazette is published on the 11th of September and certain legal obligations have to be fulfilled before holding elections. According to the amended bill, the Delimitation Committee will conclude their proceedings by mid-April and provincial council elections should be held by July. There is no issue with the inclusion of the bill, but the way it was tabled is not traditional.
නමුත් පනත ගෙනාපු විදිය සම්ප්‍රදාය විරෝධී.
Deputy Minister of Power and Renewable Energy Ajit P. Pereira today elaborated on the country's legal process. He charged the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption has only managed 3 convictions on corruption charges over the past 23 years. Addressing a media briefing, the minister also announced several suggestions put forth by the Sectoral Oversight Committee on Legal Affairs and Anti-Corruption on hastening the legal process, which is to be implemented within 6 months together with the Attorney General's Department.
රුපියල් මිලියන 5කට වැඩි වටිනාකමකින් යුතු
Steps will be taken to implement a trial-by method for offenders pertaining to bribery, asset declaration, corruption and crimes amounting to over 5 million rupees. Cases pertaining to such activities will be put under the Attorney General, who in turn will notify the Chief Justice to take necessary legal measures. The trial-by method will be an efficient legal process as hearings are held on a daily basis with only one appeal. We also brought forward a suggestion to establish 3 anti-corruption high courts in Colombo, for which a new act has to be established. The Parliament will select which cases to be heard in these courts. We also suggested that the maximum number of High Court judges be increased to 110. Our report also suggested that recorder judges be appointed to create the necessary framework to enable day-to-day trials.
වාර්තාධිකාරී විනිසුරුවන් රෙකෝඩර් ජජස් කියලා කියනවා පත් කිරීම.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Derana, which has been conquering the sphere of television news reporting for more than a decade, claimed the award for Best Investigative News Reporting for the 8th consecutive time at the 22nd Sumati Awards yesterday.
Sumati Tele Awards 2017 was held at Nelumpokunu Theatre under the patronage of Speaker of Parliament Karu Jayasuriya. Adding to the glamour of the award won by Derana for Best Investigative News Reporting, TV Derana was also able to claim several awards.
හොඳම රූපවාහිනී ගවේෂණාත්මක ප්‍රවෘත්ති වාර්තාකරන ප්‍රථම ස්ථානය Derana රූපවාහිනිය.
Naomi Fernando of Derana emerged as the second runner-up for the Best Female News Presenter Award. Devani Inima, which is telecasted on TV Derana, won the award for the most popular teledrama of the year, while Nayanthara Wickramaratne was crowned the most popular actress of the year. The award for Best Actress went to Umali Tilakaratne, while Sumit Ratnayaka was adjudged the Best Actor. Meanwhile, the UW Sumithipala Commemorative Lifetime Award of the 22nd Sumithi Awards was presented to Sri Lankan cinema stars Swarna Mallavarachi and Neeta Fernando.
Now, the public was left inconvenienced by the island-wide trade union action launched by the Government Medical Officers Association. Meanwhile, a strike launched by the teacher and principal trade unions in support of the GMOA was rather hit and miss. The Government Medical Officers Association launched the strike to force the government to abolish SITEM. They were assisted by all the doctors of the association, the Government Dental Surgeons Association and the Government Ayurveda Medical Officers Association.
අනේ මන් දන්නේ ඉතින් හැමදේම මේගොල්ලන්ට ලැබෙනවා අපිට බෙහෙත් ටිකවත් නැහැ. ඒක තමයි අපිට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
සයිටම් ආයතනය ගැන තීරණයක් ගන්නකම්ම වර්ජනයක් කරනවා නම් සුදුසුයි කියලා මං කියනවා.
The trade union action, however, was not launched in some hospitals. In the meantime, convening a media briefing, the GMOA revealed their future plans.
We clearly say that if officials do not take measures even after this strike, we will announce more serious decisions. What is happening today is that state money is transferred to a private institute via a fake takeover.
Meanwhile, schools in some areas were affected by the strike launched by the Ceylon Teachers Services Union.
As a whole, more than 50% of teachers and principals listened to our request. In some districts, more than 70% of teachers went on sick leave.
Certain schools, however, functioned as usual.
පෞද්ගලිකව සයිටම් විරෝධී. හැබැයි අපි ගුරුවරු විදිහට කවදාවත් ළමයි වෙනුවෙන් අපි එහෙම කරන්නේ.
You are watching Sri Lanka's trusted news brand, Other Derana 24/7.
Welcome back. Program leader for the growth and competitiveness for Sri Lanka from the World Bank Group, Tatiana Ninua, says that although Sri Lanka's growth pattern has had a positive trend in the recent past, it is not sustainable in the long run. She made these remarks at an event held at Colombo Customs recently. An event to raise awareness on the National Single Window and Trade Information Portal, which is in line with the implementation of the historically largest trade facilitation agreement of the World Trade Organization, was held in Colombo. The NSW and TIP will allow parties involved in trade and transport to lodge standard information and documents with a single entry point to fulfill import, export and transit regulatory requirements.
I think it is truly important for the country to exploit the growth potential that exists, especially on the back of private sector development, in order to step up the development path. So far, Sri Lanka has had quite impressive growth pattern, first on the back of the post-war growth effort and then on the back of public sector investment. The problem with this growth pattern is that it is not sustainable. The low-hanging fruits have been picked out. And so, given budget constraints, no government has an unlimited amount of funding. The public sector-led growth pattern will have to be replaced by structural reforms, by a more sustainable regulatory reform pattern where the private sector is enabled to drive that growth independently and by itself, side by side with the public sector.
And we know that reform is always hard, but the biggest lesson that we learnt from our reform process in Australia was the establishment, or the importance of the establishment of social consensus around economic reform. And we realised that we needed to win the argument in favour of openness, getting business, getting unions, bureaucrats, consumers and political players all to agree that reform would benefit everyone ultimately, that would lift both living standards and lift corporate profits.
Sri Lankan shares ended flat today near a more than 5-week closing high hit in the previous session, as gains in beverage and construction shares were offset by losses in bank stocks. The Colombo Stock Index ended 0.02% lower at 6,451, edging down from its highest close since the 14th of August. Let's now cross over to Mesh Fernando from the Colombo Stock Exchange.
The turnover was 541.41 million rupees, with 24.4 million shares changed in hands in 4,503 trades. Today's foreign purchases were 285.42 million rupees and foreign sales were 231.35 million rupees. There were 3 crossings today and the crossing turnover was 120.08 million rupees.
Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan rupee ended firmer today as dollars selling by exporters surpassed mild demand for the greenback from importers. The spot rupee ended at 152.65 to 75 per dollar compared with yesterday's close of 152.70 to 85. Here is how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against the other currencies around the world.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
President of Mexico Enrique Peña Nieto declared 3 days of mourning as the death toll of the 7.1 magnitude earthquake continues to increase. International media say at least 230 individuals are confirmed dead. Meanwhile, 3 other major earthquakes were reported within the last 24 hours, continuing the terror in the Pacific Ocean.
Several earthquakes have been recorded in the countries New Zealand, Japan and Indonesia just hours after the devastating 7.1 magnitude earthquake in central Mexico. With elections looming, New Zealand was hit with 3 earthquakes, including one with a 6.1 magnitude off South Island. A similar earthquake struck off the coast of Japan yesterday, a few miles away from the location of the earthquake, which led to a tsunami in 2011. Continuing the massive ring of destruction, Indonesia was also hit by a 5.7 magnitude earthquake today. Local weather services speculate it may cause a tsunami in the island of Bali. However, no warnings have been issued so far.
New Zealand Prime Minister Bill English cast his early vote in the general election today, with the National Party reclaiming a lead over the opposition Labour Party.
The general election of New Zealand is due to be held on the 23rd of this month, while its voting began last week. The latest election polls reported a 6-point jump by the National Party, which reached 46%, while the Labour Party fell behind by 7 points to 37%. Meanwhile, an individual reportedly set himself on fire in front of the Parliament just 2 days ahead of the general election. Police say the individual was rushed to the Wellington Hospital in critical condition.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
CEO of Sri Lankan Cricket Ashley De Silva says day-night matches are the way forward for Sri Lanka cricket. He elaborated on his views at a media briefing held today regarding the upcoming UAE Test series between Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Meanwhile, the security of the players was also taken up for discussion at the briefing.
As per the agreement which they have signed with Sri Lanka Cricket, there is a contractual obligation, but always the players, if they have concerns, they could bring it to the notice of the management, but so far they have not brought anything to the notice of the management. They are aware that the last match has been scheduled to be played in Pakistan.
Will there be any repercussions for the players if they so decide they don't want to take the risk?
I don't think so, but we would look at their security first, and we'll give them the assurance that nothing would happen if they are to go to Pakistan.
Let's now cross over to Dhammika Ekanaike at the Other Derana Weather Centre.
Good evening and welcome to the Weather Centre. Now, over the next 24 hours, we can expect temperatures to vary between 20 and 34 degrees Celsius, with the eastern regions of the country set to have warmer temperatures. We can also see formations of a low pressure zone in the central region of the island. There will be sunny weather in the northern region, especially in Jaffna, Anuradhapura and Batticaloa. Moving southwards, wet weather can be expected in the cities of Colombo, Galle, Mathura and Kandy. Now with that, let's take a look at your city by city forecast.
And before we go, we'd like to take you to visuals of snow falling from Manali in Himachal Pradesh in India. Now, we hope you enjoy these visuals, but thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.